I wasn't a good man. That's a simple truth, not a confession. I didn't grow up with the wrong crowd or fall in with bad influences. I was the bad influence. I made my choices with the cold clarity of a mathematician solving an equation. When the trial finally ended, the judge, a man with tired eyes and a face carved from disappointment, said I was the most calculated and remorseless man he'd ever sentenced. He granted me life without the possibility of parole. No visitors, no phone calls, no possibility of release. They didn't just lock me in a cell, they buried me in a concrete tomb. And that was that, until she came along. That day began like the 4,117 before it. The clang of a distant gate, the smell of bleach and despair, the low hum of the fluorescent lights that never turned off. Then, the scrape of a key in my cell door. Guards, 2 of them, pulled me out without a word. They were mountains of muscle and indifference. 2 more fell in behind me, their boots echoing mine in a grim procession. We passed through corridors where the walls sweated under the perpetual light, a condensation of misery. Doors slid open ahead of us with the sterile beep of a keycard scan, then hissed shut behind. Eventually, we stopped at a reinforced door, one I'd never seen before. It looked like the entrance to a bank vault. One of the guards stepped forward and unlocked it without speaking. A draft of cold, recycled air drifted out into the hallway. Inside was a Spartan room, a single table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs, also bolted down. One was empty, the other was occupied. Her eyes were already locked on mine before the guards forced me to sit. She wore an immaculate grey suit with a pinstripe pattern so faint it was like a ghost on the fabric. Her hair was pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch the pale, flawless skin of her face. She looked like she'd been assembled in a lab, not born. The guards shackled my wrists to a heavy steel ring at the center of the table and retreated, closing the door with a final, booming thud. She didn't introduce herself. Her voice, when it came, was as smooth and sterile as the room. "Do you want to rot here until your skin sloughs off your bones and the rats get brave enough to chew on your marrow?" she asked. "Or do you want a chance?" She sounded studio-practiced, every syllable honed to a sharp edge. I didn't answer. Silence was the only weapon I had left. She slid a folder across the table. A thick black clip held the pages together. My shackled arms could barely move, but she didn't seem concerned with that. "There's a site," she said, tapping the folder with a perfectly manicured index finger. "A cave system. Deepest ever discovered. Deeper than anything on record. Our first expedition didn't return." She let the statement hang in the cold air, her gaze unwavering. They made it several kilometers down before something killed them. We believe the agent was biological, hostile, and possibly sentient. She let that sit for another second, watching me, gauging my reaction. I gave her nothing. She flipped the folder open. The first image was a high-altitude aerial shot of a dense, unforgiving mountain range, a jagged spine on the Earth's crust. It was followed by several grainy stills of people in bulky environmental suits, carrying gear through a narrow, jagged tunnel. We considered sending qualified personnel, scientists, soldiers, but the risk is too high. The asset is too valuable to lose. We'd rather lose someone. Replaceable. Her eyes met mine again, cold and flat. "You're a murderer, a domestic terrorist. The state has already declared you a dead man. You have no family, no connections. If this doesn't work, your absence won't create a ripple. We'll find another one like you. Cheaper that way." She paused, then folded her hands neatly on the table. "You won't be alone. After a short debrief, you'll be taken to the cave entrance with 3 others. You'll be outfitted with recording devices, weaponry, and monitoring equipment. There is a strong, almost certain likelihood you will not return. If, however, you survive and complete the contract, you walk free. She tapped the folder again. Clean record, new identity. You pick where you go. A ghost. My first instinct was to laugh, a dry, rusty sound that hadn't left my throat in years. I hadn't tasted untainted outside air in over a decade. I hadn't seen a sky that wasn't crisscrossed with mesh and wire since my sentencing. So I didn't ask what the contract involved, what they were really looking for, or how many others had already been fed into this meat grinder. It didn't matter what I signed. I'd already died once. If this got me one breath of real air, even if it was my last, I was ahead. Fine, I said, my voice rough. Strap me in. She nodded to someone I couldn't see, a slight, almost imperceptible gesture. I felt the sharp sting of a needle in my neck. A profound cold spread through my spine like liquid nitrogen before I could even ask where I was being taken. The ceiling peeled away from me. Then the light. Then everything. I woke in a bed with clean sheets. The walls were white, the ceiling a smooth, unbroken surface with a built-in glow panel that lit the room without a bulb or fixture. It was the antithesis of my cell. Before I could sit up properly, a door slid open with a soft whoosh. A man in sterile white clothes stepped inside, gestured for me to follow, and stepped back without a word. He led me through a short corridor and into a chamber where the lights were brighter, colder. It felt like a pre-op room. 4 chairs faced a large screen. 3 were already occupied. A man with a tag that read Hollis on his tactical shirt sat with his legs spread wide, arms tattooed to the wrist, a permanent smirk planted on his unshaven face. He glanced at me and snorted, a sound of dismissive amusement. Beside him sat Drew, bald and built like a concrete block, his massive hands clasped between his knees. He didn't react to my presence at all. He just stared forward with dead, unwavering focus. The third was a woman, smaller, with the name Wren on her tag. Her shoulders were hunched, and nervous energy rolled off her in waves. She twitched every few seconds. Sometimes her head jerked sharply to one side. Sometimes her knuckles whitened as her fists tensed, then released. A strange, choked sound would escape her lips every once in a while, a vocal tick she was trying to suppress. Nobody said a word as I sat in the last open seat. The lights dimmed, and the screen blinked on. The presentation was short and vague. Blurry footage of cave walls, scrolling sensor data, geological charts. Nothing identifiable. Nothing about what had killed the first team. Afterward, we were ushered into another room. This one had a long, cold steel table and no chairs. A man in a black tactical uniform stood at the far end, holding a remote in one hand and a tablet in the other. As you already know, he sighed, as if bored by the entire process. You're going underground. You'll be outfitted. You'll be monitored. Your vitals, your audio-visual recordings, every word you say will be logged. You'll have one guide. He gestured toward the nervous woman. Her name is Wren. Wren glanced up, her eyes wide, but didn't speak. She was part of the first mission, he continued. She didn't witness the primary event. She abandoned her team before it occurred. She was found days later at the mountain base, suffering from exposure and acute psychosis. She ran, Hollis said, grinning. You're sending us down there with a coward. Wren flinched as if struck. Her shoulders jerked, and her head ticked violently to the side. She tried to hold still, but the tension coiling inside her was impossible to miss. The man in black ignored them both. "You are explorers. You're being given an opportunity. Find out what happened. Find out what they discovered. Assess the biological threat. You will have audio and video documentation running at all times. You will not go off plan. You will not deviate from the route she outlines. You will not improvise. Do that, and you might have a shot at walking out." They loaded us into the back of a windowless truck. The door slammed shut, plunging us into absolute darkness. There was no sense of movement beyond the deep, humming vibration of the road beneath us. Wren and I sat across from each other. For most of the first hour, the only sounds were Hollis's quiet chuckling and the rhythmic thrum of the tires. Wren's leg bounced, a frantic, silent drumbeat in the dark. "You all right?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence. She jumped. In the pitch black, I could feel her tense. "Yeah," she whispered. "Sorry, it's not." She stopped, and I heard her take a shaky breath. "It's hard sometimes." "You were there before?" It wasn't a question. She nodded, a movement I sensed more than saw. "What happened?" "Well," she said, her voice small. "It's silly, but I was scared. I left before anything even happened, just like he said. I didn't have a reason. I felt it. The pressure, the dark. It felt like the rock was breathing. Something about the place spooked me, so I ran out of the cave. I just ran all night." "And you still don't know why?" "I've been trying to figure it out, especially after they questioned me. For weeks. I guess in the end I avoided the danger." She sounded sincere, lost. Then her tone shifted, gaining a flicker of energy. "Are you scared of going back in?" "Of course," I said. "Something in there killed your colleagues." She slowed, her voice dropping again. "They told me I breached my contract, that I was required to do this, to guide the next team." There was a brief pause. "Why are you here? I mean, really?" I thought about the truth, the meticulously planned series of bombings against corporate infrastructure, the lives lost as collateral damage, the cold satisfaction I'd felt. "I lit some buildings on fire," I said, keeping it simple. She didn't look away, even in the dark. I could feel her gaze on me. "Do you regret it?" I didn't answer right away. I watched her, or the space where she sat. "I guess so." Her eyes seemed to search for something in the darkness. Maybe she found it. I heard a small sound, like a nod. Then she retreated back into her silence. When the truck stopped, they kept us inside for another 20 minutes, the silence amplifying the tension. When they finally opened the doors, the daylight hit me like a physical blow. I had to shield my eyes, my vision swimming in white spots. A dozen figures in full hazmat gear waited near a chain-link gate that had been rigged into a stretch of pale, wind-swept rock. They pointed us toward a crate full of weapons. I took a pump-action shotgun and a sidearm. Hollis went straight for the automatic rifle, smirking when no one stopped him. Drew slung a belt of shells over his shoulder and picked up a shotgun like it was a toy. "You're really giving us guns?" Hollis said, shaking his head and turning to face us. "They gave the prison crew guns." He turned toward Wren, who had backed herself against the side of the truck, her face pale. She hadn't taken anything from the crate. "What about her?" he said, gesturing with the rifle. "Do we even need her? What if we just take her hostage, walk her back out, tell them we want a helicopter?" He didn't sound entirely serious, but he wasn't joking either. One of the men in a hazard suit gave him a long, cold look. Hollis piped down, looking disappointed. A man in a different colored suit gave us a final briefing. Equipment had already been staged inside. Ammunition, lights, nutrition packs, Water. There would be no communication once we entered. We would document everything, follow the route, and if we tried to exit early, the blast doors would remain locked until the scheduled retrieval time, weeks from now. The cave entrance was tiny, little more than a jagged slit in the stone, a black mouth breathing cold, dead air. The walls inside were uneven, jagged in some places, then unnaturally smooth in others. They were wide enough for two of us to walk side by side. We moved through long, winding tunnels that occasionally opened into chambers large enough to park aircraft in. The darkness so complete, our headlamps seemed to do little more than punch small, temporary holes in it. Wren led the way. She had a tablet secured to a vest and a laminated map strapped to her leg, her tics more pronounced in the oppressive silence. We found a flat stretch of tunnel that widened near a wall of crushed sediment. Someone had left old markers, orange tags, half buried under dust. Wren told us this was the first designated stop. We wouldn't reach the next landmark until morning. We dropped our gear. Drew leaned against a slab of rock and was asleep almost immediately. After a few minutes, Wren approached me, looking hesitant. "I don't want to be near them," she said, her voice a low whisper. "Yeah, I know. Maybe I'm getting scared for no reason again, but what if they do something?" "They might," I said. "Let's just stick together. Them and us." "Sure," she nodded, breathing out slowly. Then she lowered her head and mumbled something I didn't catch. We all woke around the same time, the silence of the cave a heavy blanket. Nobody spoke. We just started walking again. A few hours in, the nature of the cave shifted. The walls widened, the floor leveled out, and the tunnel kept expanding. That was the first place we saw the trail. It stretched across the stone like someone had spilled a vat of liquid mercury and let it cool. Long, shimmering lines of dull, silvery metal were fused with the ground, following the cave's natural channels. Some parts had pulled into circular, mirror-like patches. Others looked like they had been flung outward during rapid motion. Wren stopped and knelt. She started, her voice trembling slightly. "The original crew, the satellite scan, if I remember, something in this range gave a return that matched heavy rhodium content. A dense, unnatural concentration. Could be worth a fortune." We kept walking. More trails appeared. Some ran along the walls, a few looping over natural arches high above our heads. It was everywhere. It reached a junction where the ceiling opened into a chamber almost the size of an aircraft hangar. The walls glinted. Strips of exposed minerals caught our lights. Veins of gold, silver, and something darker ran through the rock like the roots of some petrified alien tree. That was when I heard it. A series of sharp, distinct clicks echoing from the tunnel behind us. They were fast, like metallic castanets. I turned. It emerged from the bend in the tunnel without warning, moving on all fours, but rising as it entered the open chamber. Its forearms were twisted at a sick, unnatural angle, ending in serrated appendages that resembled both organic talons and surgical blades. Beneath its skin, if it could be called that, something pulsed in irregular spasms. Cables of muscle rolled beneath a fused metallic and oily surface, as though it had been dipped in molten chrome and left to congeal in uneven, hideous patches. Its head was horrific, elongated, tapering to a point that hovered behind its shoulders. Its jaw didn't open wide. It split downward, unhinging into 4 separate petal-like folds. Thin lines of what looked like molten metal leaked from the seams, hissing as they dripped onto the stone floor. It raised its head, turning it slowly, almost as if it were trying to listen. We stood frozen in the silence. Then Hollis lifted his rifle and fired, A full, deafening burst tore through the cavern. Shells clattered to the ground. Drew stepped up behind him and joined in, racking a round into his own shotgun with a grim grin. The creature didn't even flinch, but it started moving toward them, alerted to their position. It was impossibly fast and fluid. Hollis got half a breath into a triumphant laugh before it reached him. One serrated arm swiped, and his legs were gone. Another swipe tore through his chest. There was no scream, just the wet slap of contact, and the thud of his torso hitting the ground. Drew kept firing until his gun locked open on an empty chamber. The creature pivoted toward him, already moving. I turned and ran. The motion seemed to snap Wren out of her trance. She moved with me, her body convulsing in both physical and vocal tics. The gunshots behind us faded. Then there was silence. Wren gasped for breath, her mouth open, but no sound coming out. I pushed her harder toward a split in the tunnel ahead. We moved fast and low, and then I realized something. It was blind. I slowed, pulling her behind a wall of rock where the ground dipped. Her head shook violently. She kept whispering something beneath her breath, split up by involuntary yelps that were far too loud. "You have to stop," I hissed. "Do you hear me?" She nodded hard, her jaw clenched tight. Sweat ran down her face in streaks, and her whole body trembled from the effort of holding still. "It can't see," I whispered, my lips almost touching her ear. "It can only hear us. You have to stay quiet." She nodded again. This time her body stilled. Not entirely, but enough. We moved without speaking, every step a calculated risk, every breath feeling like a shout in the immense silence. The tunnels narrowed again as we descended. Behind us, the clicking sounds of the creature could still be heard, but it was far enough away to give us a sliver of hope. We entered another chamber, smaller than the last, but wide enough for the darkness to stretch past the range of our lights. The ceiling bowed downward. I stepped around a jagged edge and nearly tripped over a body. It wore the tattered remains of an environmental suit, the fabric fused to the limbs, torn open across the chest. The skin beneath had dried into something grey, stiff, and hollow. I counted 3 more nearby. Wren knelt slowly next to one. "I knew her," she whispered. I tapped her on the shoulder and gestured for her to move on. There was no time. The tunnel dropped hard after that. We slid down a steep slope of loose rock. The air was changing again, growing hotter. It hit my face before we saw the source. We rounded a final bend, and the floor dropped out into a massive, breathtaking chasm. Wren and I stared in disbelief. Below us was a lake, but not of water. It was a vast, shimmering pool of molten metal. Gold, silver, and an impossible cobalt blue bled into each other in a slow, endless, silent loop. Blistering heat poured from its surface. Our attempts at rationalization were cut short by a familiar clicking sound from the tunnel behind us. We had reached a dead end. We scrambled to the side, taking cover behind a jagged ridge of stone at the lake's edge. It wasn't much, but it broke the line of sight. Wren's body convulsed, and she clamped both hands over her mouth, her eyes screwed shut. If she made a single sound, we would die. I could feel the creature approaching, a subtle shift in the air as it entered the chamber. Its clicks were slower now, more deliberate, searching. Wren reached for me, her fingers closing around my arm, trembling violently. Her eyes met mine, wide with a terror so pure it was almost sublime. She knew. I looked at her. I didn't say anything. There wasn't time. Even a whisper could end it. I saw the calculus of the situation laid out before me. Her tics were a liability, a sound bomb waiting to go off. There was one guaranteed way to create a loud, predictable, and irresistible distraction. It was the only move left on the board. She mouthed something, a single, silent word. Please. I raised the shotgun. Her head shook, small and sharp. Her lips trembled. Her hand tightened on my arm, her fingernails digging through the fabric of my sleeve. Her mouth opened, a perfect O of silent protest. Her eyes screamed. I fired. Her head snapped sideways, gone before the rest of her had time to fall. Blood and matter hit the rock behind us in a wet, percussive splash. Her body collapsed at my feet. The creature exploded into motion. I heard it land on the rock above me, then drop down on the other side. Its bladed tail ran right past my arm as it moved to inspect Wren's body. It lifted her by the torso and walked out of view. I could hear the liquid sloshing. Curiosity, cold and terrible, got the better of me. I peeked around the corner. The monster was walking slowly into the lake of metal, Wren's body in tow. The surface took both of them, the molten silver and gold folding upward to embrace the creature as it descended into the glowing pool. Then it was gone. The lake smoothed over, silent and still, as if nothing had ever broken its surface. I didn't wait. I stood and ran. I followed the path back up, one hand on the rock wall to guide me. Eventually, I reached the chamber where Hollis and Drew had fallen. Drew's body was bent in half across a flat boulder, split open from the ribs down. Hollis lay a few feet away, or at least most of him did. His rifle was still clutched in one hand. By the time I saw the faint blue glow of the reinforced entrance, I couldn't feel my legs. 2 guards stood at the threshold. Their mirrored helmets reflected my own battered, bloody face as I stumbled forward. They didn't move until I crossed the final threshold and fell to my knees. One of them stepped forward and removed the shotgun from my back. The other retrieved the body cam. They helped me to my feet and led me into a transport. A little while later, she sat across from me again, in the same grey suit, looking just as pristine. "We reviewed your footage," she said, her voice flat. "Your documentation exceeded expectations." She flipped through a few pages. What happened to Wren was unfortunate, but her failure provided valuable data on the asset's hunting patterns. She closed the folder and pushed it aside. "You've done your part." She gestured toward the door. The hallway stretched in front of me, too bright to focus on. A man in a black uniform walked me through 2 checkpoints, then into another chamber. He handed me a small envelope. Inside were travel documents, a debit card, and a folded sheet with my new credentials. I was escorted outside, and just like that, I was alone. I walked until the facility shrank behind me, becoming nothing more than a shape at the edge of the stone. I was free. The air was clean, the sky was vast and open, and the only sound was the wind. And in my head, over and over, the silent scream in a dead woman's eyes,